What's going on, boys and girls? Welcome to episode 34 of the Sicko Sports Podcast. It is Friday, December 10th. Today is going to be a heavy UFC show. There is a huge pay-per-view tomorrow, UFC 269. Do not miss this upcoming pay-per-view. We are spoiled by Dana White and the UFC for the fights that we have coming out. But before I get into UFC 269, I would be remiss if I didn't speak on the sudden and tragic loss of a former NFL player, Demaryius Thomas of the Denver Broncos. If you remember Demaryius Thomas, which you should, he was an extremely talented wide receiver, won a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, but probably became a Bronco legend and will be remembered for the play against the Pittsburgh Steelers when he had Tim Tebow as his quarterback. That touchdown catch he had on a slant route in overtime to send Pittsburgh home, a game that they had no shot. People gave them no chance to win. Demaryius Thomas makes a huge play, probably the play of his career, and somehow shocks the Pittsburgh Steelers at home to send them out of there. So, passed away yesterday. Saw the news just blowing up on my timeline. I had to look into it. Nothing has really been reported other than that it was stemming from a previous medical issue, or it was just a medical issue in general, that unfortunately he lost his life. 33 years old, so young. I mean, could have, a guy who just retired not too long ago. Just a tragic loss. Tragic loss. So T's and P's go out to his family. I know there's a lot of people in the NFL, a lot of people around the league that knew him and played with him who are devastated right now at the news. So quick moment of silence for number 88, Demaryius Thomas. All right, now we are back. And like I said, UFC 269 coming up tomorrow night. Weigh-ins are happening here in a little bit. Hopefully everybody can weigh in. Hopefully everybody's on weight. Hopefully every fight is confirmed, ready to go, because there are some giant fights in this card. I'm not going to start from the bottom and work my way up, nor am I going to start from the top and then work my way down to the prelims. I don't want to give you guys too long of fights that you don't really care about. So I'm going to kind of bounce around. It might upset you if you have OCD, like, man, this guy's bouncing around the card. But I just want to hit on fights that I know are entertaining, get to fights that I know you guys are going to be excited to watch. And we start off, we'll kick off this episode the same way that the main event, the main card, is going to get kicked off, which is Howlin Paiva. Sugar Sean O'Malley, my boy, returns after his impressive win against Chris Moutinho, fighting against a guy, Howlin Paiva, who I know Sean gets called a can crusher, but Paiva's not that. He's not a can. This is a guy who was ranked 15th when they made the fight and then got taken out. I don't know how you get taken out of the rankings without losing. Somebody obviously slides in. Paiva gets dropped out. But this is a fight that isn't a can. This isn't Chris Moutinho situation. This isn't a Thomas Almeida situation where he's lost a few fights. This isn't Eddie Wineland. This is a legit fighter. This is a guy who is on a bit of a winning streak. Just beat his boy Kyler Phillips, who we all had very high praise for. Kyler wins there. Now he gets to take on Sugar Sean O'Malley. Big time fight for Paiva. If he can win, beating Phillips and then beating Sugar Sean, I think his stock is going to skyrocket up. And for Sean O'Malley, it's one of those where he puts so much pressure on himself, right? Being this can crusher that everyone talks about, it really is an added pressure to yourself, because not only do you have to go out there and win, you have to put on such a performance that people go, okay, even though he's facing cans, look at what he's doing to him. So he's putting that pressure on himself, right? He's telling you, hey, I'm facing these guys, but watch my performances. Just watch the way I perform out there. And it's a situation where, even against Chris Moutinho, where he dominated that fight. If you go back and watch, if you go and look at the scorecards, obviously it didn't go to decision. Herb Dean stopped the fight. Some controversy on whether Herb Dean should have stopped that one or not. But if you go back and watch that fight, there's a judge that might have had it 50-44, if it went to the decision 50-43, like it was a complete annihilation. But because Chris Moutinho was able, I'm sorry, not 50, it was in a 5-round fight. But they had O'Malley winning not only all 3 rounds, but winning around 10-8 in that one. So 30-26 would have been one of the scorecards. But because Chris Moutinho was able to last that long, it became a situation where, people started questioning whether Sean O'Malley really is a finisher. Does he really have knockout power? Can he really put people's lights out? This guy has no business being in there with him, but yet somehow makes it. Should have made it to the end of the fight and went to a decision. But if you just watch the performance, man, at the end of the day, there wasn't a lot of success on Moutinho's part. He definitely looked outclassed and outmatched in that fight. So to see him against Paiva, again, a guy who's not a can, he's not that. But you put that added pressure on yourself when you say, I'm calling out Petr Yan, I'm calling out, these dudes, Rob Font, and these dudes at the top, I'm calling them out. Dominic Cruz, he's called out. I'm calling them out, but I'm fighting Paiva, I'm fighting Almeida, I'm fighting Chris Moutinho on short notice given, but I'm fighting those guys. This is a huge step for O'Malley, and I'm interested to see how he deals with a guy who has similar height and reach to him. Paiva, I don't think, is as big as Sugar Sean, but he is 5'7". They have Sean listed at 5'9", so he's not the tiniest guy in the world. He's not, 5'5", 5'4", one of those really small 135-pounders. He does have a little bit of height, a little bit of reach to him, so it's going to be interesting to see how Sean O'Malley deals with that. The last person we saw him fight that was similar in stature was Chito Vera. We know how that fight ended. Unfortunately, the only loss on Sugar Sean O'Malley's record. But I got to roll with my boy, right? If he's saying that he's going to put these lights out, Sean O'Malley is a rocket ship that is just ready to take off and explode into superstardom. It's there on the launching pad, and it's geared up and it's ready to go. And all we're doing is waiting for that explosion, right? We know it's there. It's like a Elon Musk SpaceX spaceship. We know it has all the bells and whistles. We've heard about it so much. We see it. It looks beautiful, and we need to see it launch into outer space and do everything that we've been promised. And we're waiting for that takeoff, and it has to start with Paiva. If Sugar Sean loses this fight, even if we think Paiva is a formidable opponent, if he loses this fight, it's not what we've been promised. So because of that, I got Sean O'Malley. I got him by KO round 2. That's what I'm calling for that fight. I gotta rock with my boy. I'm super biased. It's gonna be hard for me to find ways for Paiva to win this fight. It's gonna be hard for me to find ways for O'Malley to disappoint because I am so biased towards Sugar Sean O'Malley. That is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, and he's back, and hopefully he's back in a big way. And it's interesting to see if this fight does go to the ground. We know O'Malley's been dedicating his last, X amount of years, really since that foot injury he had maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, it was a while back, but ever since then, he's been dedicating his, full outside of camp. It's heavy jiu-jitsu. He is 100% dedicated to becoming much, much better on the ground. We haven't been able to see it. He doesn't really necessarily want to take the fight there. He still feels like his advantages are standing because he is a natural striker, which is true. But because of this amount of time that he spent on the mats, because of the amount of time that he spent, his main coach, Tim Welch, he is a jiu-jitsu teacher. His gym, his classes are jiu-jitsu classes. They bring in Augusto Mendes Tanquinho. They bring him in, who is a world-class, well-known black belt jiu-jitsu. An endless amount of accolades there, different tournaments, championships that he's won. One of the best jiu-jitsu artists, jiu-jitsu players you'll find around the world. He is one of Sean O'Malley's main trainers, partners. He's there in his corner. So we have high expectations for Sugar Sean O'Malley on the ground. However, Paiva is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, so we don't know if Paiva's going to try to take the fight there and what that's going to look like. So I'm interested to see it, man. Part of me wants to see that fight go to the ground because I want to see the improvements. I want people to see the improvements that Sugar Sean has made in the jiu-jitsu realm. But of course, the other part of me wants a first-round knockout where Sean just pieces him up and puts him out. So Sugar Sean O'Malley, round 2, knockout over Paiva, and then that rocket ship starts going. That rocket ship starts taking off for that crazy haired guy. I'm also wonder what his hair's going to look like. I guarantee it's not going to look as fluffy and picked out as it did. They're probably going to braid it, but I'm real interested to see what type of braid Sean O'Malley has. I remember he had the marijuana shaped braids in one fight, so interested to see where he goes with it this next time up. And speaking of Sean, get us into a little bit of a verbal debate with Cody Garbrandt. Cody fights right after him against Kai Kara France. It was kind of I'm not going to lie, it was kind of a cringy situation. Like, Sean just didn't seem like he really had too much energy. Like, he was kind of like, whatever, I'll have to talk to Cody. Cody's, just kind of calling him a clown. It wasn't great. It wasn't great banter back and forth, but it was banter. They had a little, Sean O'Malley says, let's do a little face-off, a little future face-off with Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt, of course, being who Cody is. It's like, hey, any chance I have to get in somebody's face, I'm going to do it. But he has a big fight. Very opposite, right? I was talking about Sean O'Malley, about being this can crusher and working your way up slowly and doing all the things that people aren't huge fans of Sean O'Malley for doing, for the way UFC's been handling him, right? It's bringing him up slowly. Don't give him something that is something that we don't want to see. Don't give him a wrestler, some type of bad matchups that he's not going to be able to display any of his skill set. Like, the UFC has been criticized of bringing Sean along slowly. Sean O'Malley's been criticized of picking fights, which he says, hey, I just say yes. They give me a name and I say yes, and that's it. Cody Garbrandt is an opposite, right? Complete opposite of how his career has gone. He skyrocketed early, right? On The Ultimate Fighter, under Uriah Faber, TJ Dillashaw. We obviously know what happened with him and TJ, but he skyrockets. He becomes a champion, beats Dominic Cruz at such a young age. He looks like just a young rising prospect. He has a great look to him. He's got the tattoos. He could speak well. Like, he was blowing up, and then all of a sudden he goes on a crazy losing streak. All of a sudden he loses 3 in a row, gets a knockout to a crazy knockout, viral knockout against a Sun Sao. Fight that we felt like maybe Cody Garbrandt is back on track. Maybe this is the fight that's going to get Cody back to the Cody that we know. And then he ends up saying he's going to make the switch down to 125. Has issues, isn't able to get that fight. Has to pull out, obviously, for, I believe it was COVID that he had. Ends up going back up to 135, takes a fight with Rob Font, loses that fight. So then all of a sudden, if I'm not mistaken, he's lost 4 out of his last 5 fights. He's fighting 1 time a year. In 2016, his last fight that he won was Dominic Cruz. Then he loses to TJ back-to-back times, loses to Pedro Munoz, gets the knockout against the Sun Sao, and then loses to Rob Font. And now here he is at 125 against Kai Kara France. So tough for Cody. There's, again, a lot of that pressure, very similar to that Sun Sao fight, right? Against Rafael Sun Sao. Cody Garbrandt had a lot of stuff stacked against him. It was one of those fights where, dude, you can't lose 4 in a row. You can't go out there and lose another fight. He gets a viral knockout, gets that kind of criticism off his back momentarily, and then he goes and loses to Rob Font. Now he's down to 125, fighting against Kai Kara. If he loses this fight, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to see where he goes from there. I don't see him moving back up to 35 for any reason, unless that cut at 125 is so bad. But if he loses at 125 to go back up to 135, what fight do you give him at that point? Maybe Sean O'Malley, if he loses and Sean O'Malley wins and they just want to give O'Malley another name, a guy who isn't, a guy who would have been 4 out of his last 5 fights would have been a loss in that scenario. So Cody Garbrandt has to win this fight. And for Kai Kara France, this isn't something easy for Kai Kara France either. This is a guy who, again, is supposed to be more than what we've seen, right? He fights out of Israel Adesanya's camp. There's a lot of buzz. Izzy pushes him hard. They have a lot of expectations for this kid, and it really hasn't played out, right? He has some big wins. You can see the skill sets there. His last fight was a win over Rogerio Bontorin. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. Gets a KO in the first round, but he got hurt in that fight. He also had a submission loss to Brandon Royval. Before that, lost to Brandon Moreno. So he's been up and down, 2-2 in his last 4. So a guy who Cody should be favored against, especially as a bigger man. You look at Cody Garbrandt and you say, all right, if there's going to be a fight for you, if there's going to be something that we feel confident in, it would be Kai Kara-France, the guy who gets touched. Kai Kara-France has been hit before. He's definitely a guy who will take a shot. Cody will land some shots on Kai Kara-France. But the question is for Cody is, where do you go from here? You have to win this fight. And for Kai Kara-France, it's the same scenario. You lose this fight, all of a sudden you're 2-3 in your last 5. And, the writing may be on the wall for you to start in that downhill trajectory. And it's great for 125, right? 125 has been a division where it's starting, there was a moment in time where that division looked like it just wasn't living up to the expectations. They didn't have a lot of huge prospects coming out. Davison Figueroa all of a sudden comes out and gives us electric performances. His wins in that division pushes him forward, and we're like, okay, cool, we have a guy, we need somebody. Here comes Brandon Moreno and all of his, he's just a guy that everybody loves, beloved by everyone, blows up, has one of the most heartfelt wins, and becomes the champion. So now here we go. Now we got a few guys. There's still a few guys out there, but we need more names. Kai Kara-France can make a name of himself. Great. If Cody Garbrandt goes down to 125 and he's the one that makes a name of himself and puts himself into a title picture at 125, great. That division needs a few more names. So hopefully Cody can do it. It's a fight where Cody's not the smaller guy for the first time in a while. And whenever Cody's not the smaller guy, I just can't see a path to victory for the other. Right? If you're not able to manage distance and keep Cody off of you, it's hard for me to imagine Cody losing that fight. So being a bigger guy for the first time in a while, being, a possible weight bully, if that weight cut was tough for him, but he's going to balloon back up. I don't know what he's going to get back to his weight in, but if he has a 10, 15-pound weight advantage on Kai Kara-France come fight night, it's hard to imagine Cody losing that one. So give me Cody Garbrandt in that fight. Like I said, man, the thing that worries me about Kai Kara-France is the fact that he does get hit. And if you get hit, the last person you want to fight against is Cody Garbrandt, because he does possess crazy power. We still see him. We saw in that Sun-style fight where it just takes one shot. And it's not a shot that wobbles you. It'll be a shot that puts your lights completely out. Give me Cody Garbrandt by KO in that fight as well. I'm going to jump down to the prelims because there is a fight with somebody who beat, right, 2 former opponents of Cody Garbrandt, a guy that he beat and a guy that he lost to, in Pedro Munoz and Dominic Cruz. A very interesting fight there. Munoz obviously coming off of a loss to Jose Aldo. Dominic Cruz coming off of a recent win. Another fight where both these guys want to get back into that title picture. Both these guys want to get cemented back into a top 3 fight. So hopefully they're both just a fight or 2 away from another title shot. This is the hope for both guys. A very, very interesting fight, man. I mean, this fight isn't going anywhere. It's going to be hard to imagine this fight going to the ground. Dominic Cruz, some choice words for DC, for Daniel Cormier. Dominic Cruz, a guy who always gets labeled as kind of a jerk, man. He's not the most beloved fighter in the UFC. A lot of people think that he's just very arrogant, very cocky. So it's going to be interesting to see how DC handles this, side play-by-play, how he does his commentary for Dominic Cruz, because they did work together, man. And for what we thought is they were really good friends, Dominic Cruz is like, hey, you're still my friend. Even though I talk shit about you, you're still my friend. Dominic Cruz saying that DC is just very unprepared during fights, that he just wants to do his job, make his money, and get out, that he doesn't really take time watching the film, and he doesn't prepare himself the way he feels like a commentator should be preparing himself. DC obviously took a little offense to it, had to sit down with him, a conversation with him, told him that, things that they say in private should be kept private. But they had a little cool riff. It's going to be interesting to see how DC handles that. But a big fight for Dominic Cruz, man. If whichever one of these guys loses fight, whether it's Munoz or Cruz, it's going to be so hard to picture them somehow getting back into a title picture. These guys, it's another situation where the UFC takes 2 guys who are very similar in each other and saying, hey, you guys once were contenders. Obviously, Dominic Cruz is a former champion, but we're going to put you guys against each other. You guys, these are 2 guys that definitely cannot have a loss in this stage of your career where you're trying to get back to a title picture. let's put you guys up against each other and let's see what happens. So in this fight, man, I like Dominick Cruz. It's always hard for me to bet against Dominick Cruz. I think his personality keeps people from really understanding who he is and what he's done for this sport. You know, to me, he's very similar to Jose Aldo. Not in dominance, I'm not saying that he's up on the same, in the same area of the GOAT list with Jose Aldo. No, what I'm saying is he's a champion for a long time. He's a champion in multiple promotions, right? He was a guy who was looked at that time in his prime. When you go back to Dominick Cruz's prime performances, when he was at his very, very best, Dominick Cruz was a guy who people considered like, hey, this could be one of the best 135ers we've ever seen. He could be that guy. He is one of the best fighters in a long time. His IQ, he was talked about in such high regards. But here recently, as soon as he loses some fights, as soon as he gets to a point where he's, not fighting for the title, now all of a sudden it's, oh, Dominick Cruz is arrogant, he's cocky, he's not as good as he thinks he is, and all these things start coming out on him. He's still a very, very tough fight for anybody. He's still a tricky dude. He's still very unorthodox, great wrestling, really good stand-up. Like I said, the head movement, the footwork. I mean, it was a guy who everybody thought was this unsolvable puzzle when he was out there. Every fight Dominick Cruz would be out there, especially in his prime. It was how tricky he is, his footwork, his movement, his IQ level, he's so amazing at everything that he does. And all of a sudden we act like that is gone. He's still the same guy, maybe not as explosive, maybe not as powerful, but he still has that really high fight IQ. So even for him being cocky, for him being a little bit arrogant, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. So I expect him to have a good game plan coming in against Pedro Munoz. I expect him to put on a good performance. And to be honest, I expect Dominick Cruz to win this fight. I don't think this, the book is over on Dominick Cruz. I think there's still a few more chapters in this book. I think Dominick Cruz still has a few more big fights ahead of him. I don't know if he's going to win them. Again, the path to a title for me is one that I really can't see for either one of these guys right now. But a big win for one of them here, especially for Cruz. If he goes on, he still has a huge name. Who knows if he wins this fight, who he gets next. Like I said, he's not that many fights out. He might be, 2 fights away from a title shot if he gets, some really good performances. Then he might be close to being there. Josh Emmett, Dan Ige, staying in that prelim. Another huge fight. This one has banger written all over it. They can easily steal fight of the night on this card. Both guys are brawlers, man. We know about Dan Ige. We know what he brings. They don't call him 50K for no reason. Like performance of the night, fight of the night. It has written all over the wall. Josh Emmett ain't no scrub either. Josh Emmett is a banger as well. Somebody's getting cracked in this fight. Somebody's going to get cracked in this one. I love Dan Ige, man. I hope Dan Ige is able to pull it out. Again, a little biased. I'm just a big fan of his nickname. 50K is the best nickname out there, in my opinion, man. Damn, 50K Ige for the win for me. But it's going to be a banger. That one's going to be nasty. And this card, like I'm saying, this card, we are spoiled by this card. The last few fight nights haven't been bad either, but this card right here just shows you what the UFC has been doing, which is they're not playing by this boxing model. They're not saying, hey, we're going to put on back-to-back pay-per-views and spread these fights out, right? They're not giving us Charles and Dustin and then saying, hey, let's do Amanda and Pena on a different one, and let's make sure we, put Cody and Kai Kara France on another one, and Dominick Cruz and Pedro Munoz should be the co-main of another pay-per-view. No, they're going to stack the card if they have the availability to. There's so many guys on the roster, so many big names, and that's the beauty of the UFC being by having the model that they have, which is nobody's bigger than the promotion itself, right? Connor would say, I disagree. I think Connor might be a little bit bigger than the promotion himself. You see that from the numbers when there's a Connor fight compared to when Connor's not on a card. The numbers I mean, they almost get split in half for pay-per-view fights. Conor is the one guy who might be more popular and more famous than the UFC itself. But outside of that, man, they have the ability to kind of push all of these guys as their athletes and put all of them in that situation to where they can stack cards. They don't have to spread these guys out. They don't have to put these guys on different cards to try to somehow find ways to squeeze out as many pay-per-views as possible. No, we can put on a banger of a show. We can put all of our guys on there. If you're available to fight, if you're a big name, we can throw you all on the same card, and then we can do it again the next pay-per-view. There we have an unlimited amount of guys because, again, we're pushing them, we're putting them in this promotion, and we're letting their performances speak for themselves and sell the fight. So spoiled in this one. Having those fights on the prelims is nuts. Let me check the early prelims. I forget. I'm sure there's a good... Miranda Maverick is on the early prelims. Like, Miranda Maverick is a girl who everybody is very high on. She fights Erin Blanchfield, who is not an easy fight for Miranda, but people are really excited for Miranda Maverick to get back in there. We feel like she was robbed against Maycee Barber. I think, there's a pretty clear cut, it's pretty unanimous that everyone feels Miranda Maverick won that fight against Maycee Barber. She unfortunately kind of got screwed out of that one. But people love Miranda Maverick. I love Miranda Maverick. She's awesome. Erin Blanchfield, not an easy fight for her, but she's on the early prelims. Ryan Hall's on the early prelims. Randy Costa on the early prelims. Like, this card is crazy. How are you going to miss any of these fights? Like, it is tough to imagine any of these fights being missed. But back to the main card. Spoke on those fights. Jeff Neal, Santiago Ponzinibbio. Wild fight, man. I wonder what's going on with Jeff Neal. I know there were some issues that he was having. He got in a little bit of trouble, come fight week before the fight. A lot of people thought maybe this fight was going to be called off. Apparently, he's good. They said that he, was intoxicated. They came back and said that he didn't fail any type of tests or anything like that. So really weird to see what's going on with Jeff Neal, what that does in his headspace when it's fight week. You want to just be focusing on the fight week. You don't have to want to deal with any legal issues or have anything going on during that fight week. If he was out, partying, doing some crazy stuff during fight week, that also leads you to wonder, like, why? Like, what's going on? You should be in the room, weight cutting, doing your thing. So really weird situation. Jeff Neal, it seems like he's going to be all right. He's not going to be in any legal trouble. It seems like there was some kind of mix-up, something that, weird happened, misunderstanding or confusion in that one. But he fights against a tough dude in Santiago Ponzinibbio. The dude is a monster, highlight type of fighter. It's definitely another fight that's going to be a banger, another fight that could possibly be fight of the night. Santiago is actually 35 years old, much older. Jeff Neal's 31. But yeah, when you look at Ponzinibbio and you look at the size advantage that he has, the guy who's, up 6 foot or over against Jeff Neal, who's about 5'9", like, he has a reach advantage. Like I said, this fight's going to stay on the feet. Somebody's going to get cracked in this fight too, in my opinion. I mean, there's so many fights on here, like, especially on the main card when you look at, Paiva, O'Malley, Kai Kara France, Cody Garbrandt, then Jeff Neal and Ponzinibbio. Like, all three of those fights can very well get finished. Like, it's hard to imagine all three of them going to decision, but if any of those three fights could go to decision, for me, it would be Jeff Neal and Ponzinibbio. Jeff Neal's a very patient guy, man, but he has power. We've seen Jeff Neal in the past put dudes lights out. So I don't know, man. It's hard for me to imagine this fight going the distance as well. Another 3-round fight, but it's hard for me to imagine it going to decision. I think somebody's going to get caught. Neither one of these guys are afraid to get into the pocket and bang. I'm going to go Jeff Neal, man. For all the reasons that I said he shouldn't win, I'm just going to pick Jeff Neal for this fight. I think that he's going to go ahead and land a big shot on Ponzinibbio. I feel like he's a guy that's going to get it done. But another fight to keep your eye on. Don't miss any of these fights, man. I'm telling you, like, this is the pay-per-view to watch. Every single fight on this main card is a banger. And I was talking a little bit about the press conference about Sean O'Malley and Cody Garbrandt having a little bit of words. Paiva all of a sudden calling O'Malley a clown, saying that he's going to send him back to a circus after this fight. So it was a cool press conference, man. The first time we've seen one in a long time where you had everybody up there, old school style. I know, with the pandemic and the way things were going on, they weren't able to have everybody up there like that, do a big press conference this way. But I love it when they do. I love it when they have it, when they can talk trash and reporters can just rattle off questions to everybody on the main card. It makes it that much more interesting. And the one thing that really surprised me was the riff that Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena got into. Not saying that it's surprising because Juliana Pena has been talking. We've heard Amanda Nunes come back and have some choice words for her as well. But to actually see it when they are, I wouldn't say side by side, but when they are together, right, on stage at the same time, and they're able to, reporters are able to ask questions about both. Amanda Nunes wasn't pulling any punches, man. She is not, like, you can see that Amanda Nunes is very focused and very determined to finish this fight. She promised us that she's going to finish Juliana Pena, that she's going to put her away. I think she wants to knock her out, man. I don't think she wants to do anything on the ground. I think for Amanda, the path to victory is very clear, right? We can all see the path to victory for Amanda. It's going to be stay on the feet, have great takedown defense, and then piece her up, man. Put those hands on her, show her that power. We've seen it time and time again. We see how girls react when they get hit by Amanda Nunes, outside of Valentina Shevchenko, outside of, really her, like, especially on since this, 12 fight win streak that she's on. When she hits girls, they look stunned. But here's the difference between Juliana Pena and some of the other girls. I don't expect this fight to look similar to the Megan Anderson fight, right? Megan Anderson was defeated before the fight started. You saw her, she looked like a deer in the headlights. She looked like, walking into, like, everybody posts the exact same GIF, the exact same video of Megan Anderson walking into the arena, where she's wearing that, like, I think a Cleveland Indians jersey, or I forget what jersey she's wearing, but she just looks petrified. Like, she looks like she's thinking, as soon as I get an opportunity to turn and run, I'm turning and running the hell out of here. She was in there, timid, didn't want to throw, got hit, and then froze. Just didn't move, wasn't circling, and she was just waiting to the end. It's like she can just see, God calling her into the heavens, and all she had to do was just let herself go there. That's not going to be Juliana Pena. Juliana Pena has a lot more heart than that, a lot more tenacity, a lot more fire than Megan Anderson showed in that fight. I'm not trying to bash on Megan Anderson. I personally like Megan Anderson as a personality. Love her accent, man. I think, her doing stuff, sideline type stuff. I don't know if she's going to do things for Bellator and Invicta or any of that stuff, but I think she has a great, she had a good run, and I think she still has a big career ahead of her because of, her, I guess her personality, her ability to speak well. She has still a future ahead of her, man, a really good career ahead of her. Unfortunately, I think that loss to Amanda, I mean, we haven't seen her since she got let go of the UFC, so it's going to be very different for Pena, man. I think we're going to see a fight a lot more like Felicia Spencer. I think that's kind of the fight we're going to see, where Pena's going to try, dude. She's going to give it her all. She's not going to be afraid of Amanda. She's going to come forward. She knows what her best path to victory is. She's going to try to get to the body. She's not afraid to jump into the fire. We're going to see that tenacity and the fire from her. Unfortunately for Juliana Pena, she's such a huge underdog, the biggest underdog on the card, and for a reason, man. Amanda Nunes is just head and shoulders above the rest. Amanda Nunes is so much better than any girl they can give her at 135 and 145, unless Valentina Shevchenko wants to move back up to 35 and try it again. In my opinion, that's 1-1, man. I know Amanda Nunes is up 2-0 on Valentina, but a lot of people feel Valentina won that second fight, myself being one of them. That's the only fight to make. Valentina Shevchenko, unless they're able to bring in Kayla Harrison, which we saw talks this week that Dana White is starting to talk a little bit more about Kayla, about the possibilities of her bringing her into the UFC. The problem with that is Dana is very well known for bringing people in to try to set them up for failure. if you're not rocking with the UFC immediately, he wants to set you up right away. Like, it is hard for me to imagine that Dana White's going to bring Kayla Harrison in and do the right thing, which is bring her in, get her a couple fights in the UFC, get her a couple fights in the mix, a couple fights where she can make her name bigger, and then set up a fight for Amanda Nunes. I don't think he's going to do that. I think Kayla Harrison's going to come in. Again, there's no 145. There's no 145 division in women's right now, right? Amanda cleared them out. There's no rankings. There's no active roster for 145. It's just basically what girls can fight at 145. And if there's a prospect that comes in or a challenger that they can find at 145 for Amanda, and that would be Kayla Harrison. So if Kayla Harrison comes into the UFC, I think it's an immediate fight with Amanda. Like, I think that's what they would do with her, which may not be the best move, in my opinion, if you're trying to sell a fight. But if you're trying to sell Amanda as the greatest of all time, then it makes sense. And if you're trying to just see, like, hey, if she beats Amanda, all right, cool. Then why waste time getting her a few fights where if she can beat Amanda Nunes, then Kayla Harrison just automatically rises to the top. And then from there, the only real fight after that would be a rematch. I mean, it's hard to imagine what happens at that division and what happens with Kayla Harrison. But because of that talks, you already see that they're trying to find Amanda something else, right? I love Juliana Pena, man. I'm a big fan of hers, but she's not this dominant force that has been on, a killing streak, and she's the obvious clear-cut challenger to Amanda. And, there's going to be some worry there. Her heart, her effort is going to be interesting. A lot of people are excited to see. A lot of people are actually giving her more credit. I thought people would be, worried for her. Like, again, when Megan Anderson fought Amanda Nunes, like, it was immediate, like, oh, poor girl, she's going to get destroyed. Surprisingly, people aren't like that with Juliana Pena. Surprisingly, people are actually giving her some bit of a chance. I've seen some people, some notable guys that really know their stuff, talk about Juliana Pena, saying, hey, she's gonna surprise some people, man. Like, she's gonna bring the fight. Don't be surprised if she takes this into deep waters. Don't be surprised if she has some success. Don't be surprised if she scores a takedown. Don't be surprised if Juliana Pena does much better than you are expecting. And I think people will be surprised. I don't think she's gonna win. I don't think she's going to have much success in there, but she's going to be durable. She's not going to be scared. And that's what we ask for anybody fighting Amanda, right? Is that at least make it interesting. She's such a heavy favorite for such an obvious reason, but at least make it interesting. Don't do what Megan Anderson did. Come out, fight your heart out. Felicia Spencer, a girl that got a lot of credit in that Amanda Nunes fight, a fight that probably should have been stopped. A fight that she was taking so much damage in that the corner should have probably thrown in the towel. But they didn't. She went all the way through. Amanda had to push herself, and she fought her ass off, man. She gave everything she had. She wasn't a quitter. She wasn't scared. She just unfortunately didn't have the chops. She just unfortunately didn't have the ability to beat an Amanda Nunes, and I think that's going to be similar for Pena. I think she's going to come out and she's going to fight hard. She's not going to be scared, but I just don't see a path to victory, man. It's hard for me to imagine her taking down Amanda Nunes and holding her down and just staying on top and dominate. It's so hard for me to imagine that. If you're gonna have success against Amanda, I think it's you got to have success on your feet. Like, you have to have that ability to outstrike her and then have the ability to negate takedowns, right? If Jermaine Durandamine had a better wrestling defense, if she had better takedown defense, she could possess some troubles to Amanda Nunes, right? We know what Valentina can do against Amanda Nunes, but this is, you're talking about Valentina being Amanda's biggest competition, where Valentina's so far ahead of everybody else in her division. So it just goes to show you where we're at. Pena has had some recent losses. So, again, not some girl on some killer win streak where it's, like, obvious this is a big fight. And this is just kind of the best left, the best available. Like, she's already beaten the girls that should have that spot. So it's like, we're just going to keep going down the list, basically. But interested for that fight for sure. And then, of course, the big time, the fight that we're all waiting for. The main event of the evening, Charles Bronco Oliviera and Dustin the Diamond Poirier. This is a fight that is split, man. Is split through the MMA community, split through the MMA world. Dustin Poirier, you either hate him or love him at this point. You know, his beef with Conor, his last couple fights with Conor McGregor, it either got people to love him and got people completely on his side, or it got people wanting him to lose. If you're a Conor fan, though, like, if you're a huge Conor McGregor fan, him beating Charles would actually look better for Conor, right? If Dustin goes out there and loses to Charles, especially loses in a way that we just really don't expect him to, if Charles gets like a first or second round finish on Dustin, then that looks kind of worse on Conor's part. When you look at this fight, you look at Charles Oliveira and what he's done over his win streak, his last, 4 or 5 fights, and you see that he possesses so many ways to win. He just has so many ways to win, whether it's standing or on the ground. He's a good wrestler. I can see him taking Dustin down. I can see him submitting Dustin. I can see him catching Dustin. I can see him, piecing him up. There's so many different ways that Charles Oliveira can win. But when you look at Dustin, man, you look at that dog mentality that Dustin has, his ability to be in an absolute firefight, to be in a war. Justin Gaichi and Max Holloway, his last fight with Max Holloway's fight with Justin Gaichi, his fight with Dan Hooker, we see there's no quit in Dustin, man. Dustin can push you to the 5th round and just look unstoppable. He's been looking like an unstoppable force. Obviously, the fight with Khabib is a little bit of a different story, but I mean, who's beating Khabib? You know what I mean? Like it's so yeah, he didn't look great there, but outside of the Khabib fight, what gives you any notion that Charles is going to finish this fight, right? What gives you that? The way that we can imagine, or the way that I can imagine Charles Oliveira finishing Dustin Poirier is by making it very similar to what Khabib did. Get him on the ground, try to take his back, and then his jiu-jitsu base, Charles Oliveira being so skilled and so crafty on the floor, hope maybe Dustin makes a mistake and you're able to get a submission finish against Dustin. But it's hard for me to imagine that guys like Conor McGregor, guys like Justin Gaethje, guys like Max Holloway, guys like Dan Hooker, guys like that can hit Dustin with good shots and Dustin doesn't falter, Dustin doesn't waver. Guys like that can stay on the ground and Dustin does better than them and outperforms them in a striking match. It's hard to imagine that those guys couldn't get the job done standing, but Charles Oliveira will. Not to say that Charles Oliveira doesn't have the ability to, but you see Dustin's chin as of late. You've seen his ability to, be a counterpuncher, be a heavy-handed boxer, man. Dustin can definitely knock Oliveira out. We saw Oliveira get put down by Michael Chandler, who, yes, Michael Chandler has insane power as well, but you can see that happening for Dustin. You can see Poirier doing that. Here's something weird about this fight, right? This is something that I have a little bit of concern of when I look at this fight between Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira. Dustin Poirier has been talking about this as if it is just kind of a destiny, right? Like it's just a path that he's on, and it's almost God's plan. Shout out Drake, God's plan. It's almost God's plan for Dustin Poirier to be the champion, right? It's so much confidence. Like I don't think I've seen Dustin Poirier have this much confidence before in a fight. Even the last fight with Conor, he was very confident, but I don't think he was this confident. Like he seems like he's already won. He seems like he knows something that we don't know. It seems like he's seen something in Oliveira that he's like, yeah, this fight's over. I'm going to win. There's no doubt about it. And I don't know if that's a good thing for Dustin Poirier or a bad thing for Dustin Poirier. It just makes me feel like for some reason, and I know this isn't the case. I know if you ask Dustin, I know Dustin's been asked and he's talked about how good Charles is and how skilled he is. And he's accredited his work ethic and what he's done and his ability to outwork everybody into his way to a title. But when you hear Dustin talk, it just feels like yet again Charles Oliveira's opponent is underestimating him. It just feels like yet again the community may be underestimating Charles Oliveira. And to see the performances that he's put on, knockout win against Michael Chandler, submission wins against Kevin Lee, dominating a dominant wrestling match basically against Tony Ferguson, when you see what Charles Oliveira has done and all of the different ways that he has won, he possesses every single skill. He is a true martial artist. He can beat you anywhere. There's not a spot in his repertoire that he looks weak at. There's not a point in his craft where you go, if the fight goes here, Charles just can't. He just can't match up. That doesn't exist for Oliveira. So for people to just already be ready to crown, it just seems like people are ready to crown Dustin. It's like, okay, you beat Conor twice. Now it's your turn. You took the money. Now you take the belt. You go ahead and finish it off. Now, I'm not saying I'm picking Charles definitively in this fight. What I am saying is if Dustin has too much confidence in this fight, if he comes in and thinks, I beat Conor twice, I've beaten some of these guys, I feel like I could have beaten Khabib, I'm going to beat Charles Oliveira, I think he's going to have a rude awakening. I think he's going to realize, holy shit, this dude is really, really, really good, because Oliveira is. I think people still, for some reason, hang on to those losses he had earlier, the losses where they felt like there was some quit in him. You saw Justin Gaichi come out recently and say that there's quit in him, and he, any sign of adversity, he's going to falter. I mean, was there not adversity against Michael Chandler? Did he not show heart and fire against Michael Chandler? It looked like that fight was about to be stopped. All of a sudden, he makes it to the end of the round, comes down the second round and puts his lights out. Comes down the second round and connects cleanly. Wasn't afraid. Didn't get backed up into the fence. Wasn't afraid of the fire. Hits Chandler with a clean shot. And if anything, we saw Michael Chandler against Justin Gaichi. We all consider Justin Gaichi a power striker, right? We all consider Justin Gaichi to have knockout power, if I'm correct. He was able to last all rounds with Justin Gaichi. He got knocked out in the second round of Charles Oliveira. So what does that tell you about Charles Oliveira? We've seen Michael Chandler take shots from Justin Gaichi and somehow be a damn Terminator and not go down. But yet, however, against Charles Oliveira, he gets tagged one time cleanly and he's out. He's out. He was out of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how this fight plays out, man. You can see clear paths of victory to both. We know Charles Oliveira can get hit. We know that he doesn't have the greatest of chins, and that's not a good thing whenever you're facing Dustin Poirier. On the flip side, Charles Oliveira just possesses so many things to worry about, from the leg kicks, the Muay Thai type of stuff, head kicks even. He's such a technical striker, and then wrestling-wise, he can definitely take Poirier down. He could get into positions. There's no one better than him in terms of being on the ground. Poirier doesn't possess the same things Michael Chandler has, man. The ability to just power out of a terrible position the way we saw Chandler be able to. Charles Oliveira had Chandler's back early in that fight, and he just sheer gorilla strength from Michael Chandler was able to get himself out of it. I don't see Poirier being able to do that. Poirier does not have the wrestling pedigree that a Michael Chandler has. So if Charles Oliveira decides, hey man, you think it's going to be you're picturing yourself being this counter puncher, and you picture yourself getting into these late rounds and pouring it on the way you did against Max, the way you did against Justin, the way you did against Eddie Alvarez. You think that's how it's going to go? I'm taking you down. I'm putting you on the floor. I'm going to do exactly what Khabib did. I think I can do exactly what Khabib did. And all we've known is that he might be able to do that. Now, he's not the wrestler Khabib is. Obviously, I don't think anybody is in that division. Islam Makhachev's like, hold my beer. But he does possess all the tools in the world, and I want to see Charles Oliveira keep going. I think it would be cool for Dustin Poirier as well. A guy who has never been the undisputed champion. He was an interim champion, so to him to be an undisputed champion would be really cool to see this long, long journey pay off for Dustin Poirier in that way. But I'm just such a big fan of Charles Oliveira. I love Charles Oliveira, man. He is a true mixed martial artist. I love to watch him fight. The technicality of which he fights with is so impressive. The dude, like I said, there's no weakness, man. Stand-up, wrestling, grappling, jiu-jitsu, everything. There's just no weakness for Charles Oliveira. I hope that everybody's wrong about him and that his weakness is not his lack of will and he doesn't have this, faltering personality where he's going to quiver in the face of adversity. I hope that's not the case. I hope he puts on a really, really strong performance, and I hope he retains the title and defends it, and we start talking about Charles Oliveira as one of those guys. And I hope he brings Khabib out of retirement. Like, what better guy? Let's say Oliveira goes out there and finishes Justin on the ground. Let's say he's able to take Dustin Poirier to the ground and finish him down there. Let's say then he sets up a fight with Justin Gaichi, and let's say he does the same. Let's say he's able to somehow beat Justin Gaichi. Bring Khabib back out of retirement. Like, that's what what better fight is there for Khabib, right? I don't think he's going to come out of retirement. It doesn't seem like he seems like he's, in that DC mode where like they're both gaining a lot of weight, and it looks like he's just really enjoying being a coach and training with the guys and pushing Islam Makhachev to it. But think about the greatness of this, okay? Charles Oliveira beats Dustin Poirier. He then fights Justin Gaethje and somehow beats him. Islam Makhachev beats Demaryius to set up a fight with Charles Oliveira, and he somehow beats him. Think about what that would do for Charles Oliveira in terms of GOAT standards. People will start talking heavily that Charles Oliveira would beat Khabib. Khabib to me is the guy that, yes, he seems like a phenomenal guy. He seems like a great guy. Gives all glory to God. But Khabib also seems like a guy who is very, very prideful. And if people start saying this is a guy that definitely would have beaten Khabib, I think that could be enough to bring Khabib back out of retirement. So because of that, I want Charles Oliveira to not only beat Dustin Poirier, but I want Charles Oliveira to go on a big run and continue to defend the belt. He is one of my favorite fighters. I love watching him, man. I love the stuff he did. I became a huge Charles Oliveira fan when he beat Kevin Lee and the way he did it. You gotta love a dude that has the most finishes. You gotta love a dude that has knocked people out and had the most submissions in the UFC. You have to love it. Very worried about this fight with Dustin Poirier though, because Dustin is an absolute dog. But that's it for UFC 269. That's it for episode 34 of the Sicko Sports Podcast. Thank you guys as always for being here with me. As always, hit like, subscribe, smash that alert button for me, and I will be back on Monday to talk about not only the fights but also about what was happened in the NFL for week 14. So it'll be a week 14 preview along with a UFC 269 recap as well. So I'll recap those two events come Monday. I'll see you guys then. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. Love everyone around you. Peace. Say bye. Say thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Good job, pal.